preached Friday night at a former church in High Point, North Carolina. It's our 125th anniversary. And so they invited me to come back and to preach. And while I was preaching on Friday night, the school that I started there was playing for the state championship in football and won. So they presented me with a jersey that night. It was really neat. I preached with a cane. I hit a couple of folks, so don't make me come out there. Anyway, you know, as a boy, one of the things that I remember so fondly about being with my dad was that there were a number of occasions, and I've shared this with you before. My dad boxed Golden Glove, but we would follow the Frazier Ali fights on the radio. Now, that's before pay-per-view and cable TV and all of that. So we would sit up. He'd let me sit up through, 11:30 and listen to the fights, even though I had school the next day. And we became tremendous George Foreman fans. George Foreman was just, from the moment that he took the American flag and ran around the ring in the Olympics, we were just on with Foreman. We liked him. But I want you to listen to something Foreman writes about himself. His autobiography, he said, amid the chants of champ, 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 I heard someone refer to me as the king of men. Instantly, I was carried away by a magic carpet to another world. And to a 23-year-old, remember when he fought Frazier and he beat Frazier and he won he won the world championship in boxing. He was 23 years old. And I want you to listen now to what he says. At 23 years old, lacking either a true friend or a sense of moral direction, that would eventually become a haunted house. He said, I knew that night that all of my friends and the people in my corner, that if I'd have lost to Frazier, they would have all left me. They would have all been gone. And he said he got angry with that thought. He knew that they would just ditch him. And he said, I grew more and more angry. I seethed with hatred and admitted that he was empty, searching, lost, and at the same time, on top of the world. Perhaps the greatest drive that we have as members in Western civilization in 2025 is the drive for success. They say the greatest drive today among people is the desire to be popular, but what makes you popular other than success? And so we pursue it. We even pursue it. We chase after this whole thing of success. And if you doubt that, all you've got to do is just go down to Barnes & Noble or get on Amazon this afternoon and just type in success and just look at the endless list of books that deal with how to be successful. We're all after success. But the fact of the matter is Solomon was too. And that's what you see in chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes. And it's interesting that I'm doing this on this week of Thanksgiving because I want to tell you something. If you don't have anything else to be thankful for, thank the Lord that you are saved by grace through faith and not saved based on your success. You can pray that this Thursday at the table because all of us from time to time feel like colossal failures. Brad Pitt, now, everybody swoons at Brad Pitt. But now listen at his interview with Rolling Stones magazine back in I think it was back in October of 99, I believe it was. Listen to what he says. Man, I know all these things are supposed to seem important to us. The car, the condo, our version of success. But if that's the case, why is the general feeling out there reflecting more impotence and isolation and desperation and loneliness? He goes on to say the emphasis is now on success and personal gain. I'm sitting in it. And I'm telling you, that's not it. I'm the guy who's got everything. I know, but I'm telling you, once you've got everything, then you're just left with yourself. I've said it before and I'll say it again. It does not help you sleep any better, and you don't wake up any better because of it. Pretty insightful right there, isn't it? Well, any life that is out of sync spiritually, and Brad Pitt grew up in the Baptist church, by the way. His life is out of sync spiritually, obviously. And George Foreman's life was out of sync spiritually, but eventually he came to know Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Let me tell you, any life out of sync with Jesus Christ, when you pursue success, you are going to find disappointment. Now, that's exactly what Solomon is talking about in this passage. He's going to give us a number of things. There are things that success breeds. Now, you've always heard, it takes success in order to be successful. You've got to have success in order to be a success. Well, I want to tell you, I don't know if success breeds success, but I can tell you, I'm going to give you 4 things that Solomon gives us about success that it breeds. Now listen, all of us want to be successful. I mean, we don't want to be just, we don't want to be Otis Campbell and Mayberry. We would like to be a little more successful than that. But I want you to understand, this is when it becomes the drive of your life. It becomes the motivating factor in your life. So let me begin to give you these as we look, beginning in chapter 4. Number 1, when success drives us, it often produces an insensitivity. Now, I find that this is where it usually begins. And let me tell you something. This is found very much in the church in our day. And I'll get to that in just a few moments. Look with me beginning in verse 1, and let me show you where I get that from. Here's Solomon, and he says, I looked again. Now, you have to just stop with that. And let me walk you through how many times he says that and what it's implying to us. If you go back to chapter 3, he says it in verse 16, I have seen. You come down in chapter 3 to verse 22, he says, I have seen. You come to chapter 4, verse 1, it says, I have seen, or I looked. In verse 4, it says, I have seen. In verse 7, it says, then I looked. And in verse 15, it says, I have seen. Now, he's just saying this over and over and over again. I have seen, I have looked, I have noticed, I have observed. And every bit of that sounds clinical. It sounds detached. It sounds removed. It sounds like somebody is doing a senior paper in college and they are just observing something, studying something, researching something. He never gets emotional about it. What has he seen? What has he looked at? Well, he gives you right here. I looked again at the acts of the oppression, which were being done under the sun. And behold, I saw the tears of the oppressed. They had no one to comfort them. On their side of the oppressors was power. Now, he's used a form of oppressed 3 times in this verse. He says oppression, oppressed, oppressors. On the side of the oppressors was power, but they had no one, those that were being oppressed, they had nobody to comfort them. Now, let me show you, he gives you a little bit of a definition back in chapter 3, verse 16. Furthermore, I have seen under the sun that in the place of justice there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness there is wickedness. I don't think any of us, and I don't even have to use illustrations, I don't think any of us would say that we live in a day of pure justice. We live in a day when justice is perverted and twisted and distorted, and it is used for political means. That's wickedness. That's what the Old Testament calls wickedness. Now, I'm not sticking this on either party, but I'm just telling you, we live in a day that does not deal in justice. They deal more in political issues than justice, and it is wickedness before God. And the Old Testament, boy, I can take you through the Old Testament and show you how angry God gets at injustice in our day or in any day. And so he says, I've watched them, I've studied them, I've observed them, I've seen them cry. He didn't say I cried, I wept with them. He didn't say that. He didn't say, he said no one was there to come. He didn't comfort them. Now I want you to stop and think about who this is. If there was anybody in a place, in a position, in authority that had the brains and that had the resources to do something about oppression, it would have been Solomon. He was king. He was the smartest man that ever lived. And in the society and the day and the culture in which he lived, he would have been considered the wealthiest man of all time. He was the Elon Musk. He was beyond the Elon Musk of his day. And he could have done something about it, but what is he doing? I've just observed this. I've seen it. I looked at it. I noticed it. I watched it. I've kind of researched it a little bit. I've studied all of this, but nowhere does he say that something's going to be done about this. But let me show you something. He does come down, and let me find the verse. I think it's in this next verse where he talks about God's going to deal with this. Yes, over in chapter 3, verse 17, I said to myself about this injustice, God will judge both the righteous man and the wicked. We'll just leave it up to God. Now, let me tell you, do you remember what James says in his little epistle? If you see a man who's hungry and he comes into your fellowship and he's hungry and you just, man, I hope you get a good meal today somewhere, and you just walk on by. Or if you see somebody who is cold and they're shivering and they've got on just the barest of clothes, and you look at them and say, hey, brother, be warmed. In Jesus' name, be warmed. He said, what good is that? That doesn't do anything. Brother, are you having to follow me with that? Are you having to follow me? Am I outrunning you with a cane? Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I'll try not to make you do that. I see the panic look on your face, so I was just, anyway. Well, Solomon sees all of this, and he doesn't do one thing. He doesn't lift. Why? Because he's become insensitive. The drive of his life is not to do something for the oppressed. The drive of his life is to be successful. Now, let me just give you a very simple, crude, not crude, but it's just a very common illustration for that. I'll never forget the first time I went into a restaurant. I don't know if it's Texas Roadhouse or where it is, where you would eat peanuts and you'd throw them on the floor. Y'all, the shell. You've been there, you've done that. And you've all thrown them on the floor, right? Let's just look at your hands going up. Well, I got in there the first time and I walked through all these shells on the floor. I was just looking, this is horrible, this is terrible. I got to the table and I was hungry, so I started eating, but I piled mine all up in a pile. I put them right there in front of me, and I said, what am I going to do with these? And I didn't know what I was going to do, and the waitress comes by to take our order, and she says, and she reached over and just raked them in the floor. And now I can hear my mama in the back of my head saying, boy, don't you spill that stuff on the floor. Don't you get that on my floor. I just mopped in here not long. So I'm hearing all of this in the back of my head, and I'm thinking, I'm not comfortable doing that. And there's this little girl over here with one of those little dust bins, and she's sweeping and she's working, and she's got her work cut out for her. And I just thought to myself, well, I don't know what to do. So after she left, I ordered and I got another one and I ate it. And then I just slipped my hand and I just kind of dropped it under the table. Well, listen, let me tell you, pretty soon I was chunking them out there and just throwing them out there. And why? Didn't matter. Somebody else clean it up. Now I know that's what they do. That's what they're known for, all of that. I'm just telling you that in my spirit, I moved from absolutely no, I won't do that, because you just don't do that kind of thing, to, man, I'm just going to throw as many down there as I want to throw down there. You can clean it up. That's an insensitivity. And I want to tell you something. That is one of the first signs of this whole issue, that success drives my life. And tragically, we see it in the church as well. And we see it in the church in this kind of way. We see it as we talk about things we have no business talking about. We talk about people we have no business talking about. And the insensitivity in what we say about other people makes absolutely no difference, because we want to be seen as successful and on top. It's going to take me a while, but I come over here. Amen. Gossip. Do y'all realize gossip is a sin? That talking about other people is as unchristlike as anything we can do. And it shows an insensitivity on our part, because I want to tell you why. Whatever you say at Valleydale Baptist Church gets back. Now, no matter where you are, it's not just this church, it's any church. The CIA would be proud to have Baptists a part of the organization. Nothing stays a secret. Everybody finds it out. And that's what he's doing here. He's just absolutely insensitive to it all. Secondly now, success drives us, and it makes rivalries out of everyone. Everybody's my rival. It's interesting because this word, let me tell you, this word is used one time in the Hebrew. It's only used one time in the Hebrew Old Testament, and it's used right here. Now let me read, beginning in verse 4. I have seen that every labor and every skill which is done is the result of rivalry. The reason why we are doing all the things we're doing, knocking ourselves out, trying to knock everybody else out the way, is because of a rivalry between man and his neighbor, between one person and another, between this church member and that church member, between this person at work and that person at work, wherever it happens to be. And he comes and he says it's vanity and it's striving after the wind. Well, this whole thing of rivalry, every labor, every skill, everything we do becomes a contest. I've got to be a little bit ahead of the Joneses. I've got to get a little bit ahead of the person next door. I've got to get a little bit ahead of that other guy that's over in this other thing. And listen, this is Solomon speaking. This is the wealthiest man in the world. This is the smartest man in the world. This is the Jeff Bezos. This is the Mark Zuckerbergs. This is the Bill Gates. This is the Elon Musks. That's what he's living it at that level. Well, you got a rocket, I'm going to build me a rocket. You got a computer company, I'm going to get me a computer company. You've got an AI, I'm going to develop me an AI, kind of deal. And it's this kind of thing. It's all this rivalry. And there is such a tremendous sense of rivalry that goes on even among the people of God. I've got to have a better house. I've got to have a bigger house. I've got to have this car. I've got to have another car. I've got to have this. I've got to have that. I've got to have something else that's going to eventually, at some point, put me in a position that's above everybody else. Listen to what Solomon says. He comes and he says this. Now, listen to me carefully. The fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. He's not saying that you don't work hard. He's not saying that you give up work. I think the last time I preached on this whole issue of workaholism. That may not be the greatest issue in the country today. It may just be in a bunch of lazy people marks us in this culture and generation right now. Well, that's what he's saying here. He says you don't do that. You don't just check out and sit on the sofa and eat Rocky Road and potato chips all day. He's not saying you don't quit work. It's not that you don't try to go out there and earn a living. It's not that you don't go and do your job to the best of your ability. But he says but the fool folds his hands and consumes his own flesh. This is a guy just checks out. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to get my government check. I'm not going to do anything. And he comes and he says, one handful of rest is better than two fistfuls of labor and striving after the wind. Listen to what he's saying here. He's saying, come to the place where there's some balance in your life. There's got to be. When you work hard, do your best, be diligent, put everything into your work, give it your all. Work as if you're working to the Lord. But listen, for crying out loud, learn how to take a day off and rest. Keep it in perspective. Your family doesn't want you working from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, and they get nothing but grump when you get home. You have to learn a balance. You have to learn, and that's what the wisest man in the world, he will give you chunks of wisdom in a very short sentence in the midst of his own moaning and groaning. Every once in a while, he comes out with a really good, godly word of wisdom. And so he comes, and that's what he's saying right here. He says, you need to learn how to bring back some balance to your life. You men need to sit down and talk to your wives about that. And say, how can we bring some balance into our family? What are some things we need to say no to? What are some things that we need to put up as guards around our lives? And stop all of this pursuing of stuff in order to be a rival to every other person. Have I beat that long enough? Let me get you to the third thing, and the third thing is this. Success drives us into fading popularity. Now, I'm going to skip to verse 13 because I'm going to save 7 through 12 for last. But I'm coming to verse 13, and I want you to listen. He's talking about this fading personality. And folks, you will not believe. You know, if we just had endless time, I'd bring some commentaries in here from time to time that I read, and I just read you some of the stuff that they say. They have spent barrels of ink and reams of paper on writing about who this is that Solomon is talking about. And they give the most far-fetched bunch of stuff. Well, I'm going to keep it simple because all you've got is a very simple-minded pastor. That's all I am. He comes and he says this, a poor yet wise lad. That's got to be David. I don't know who else it could be. And an old and foolish king. Well, that's Saul. It's got to be Saul because he was older and he was foolish, who no longer knows how to receive instruction. Boy, that describes Saul's life right there to a T. He never listened to anything that Samuel told him. He never listened to anything that God told him. God told him to go and to offer sacrifice before they went out to battle. Very first thing that he did, and to wait on Samuel to get there to do the offering of the sacrifice. And Samuel didn't come, and he didn't come, and he didn't come. And in his own genius, Saul decides, well, I'd better go ahead and do it. Well, as soon as he does, Samuel shows up and says, Saul, 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 you know, didn't you listen? Didn't you hear what God told you? You don't do that. That's not the place of a king. That's the place of a priest. And now God is going to punish you for that. Well, you go on a little bit longer, and God comes to him through Samuel and says, listen, I want you to go, and I want you to utterly wipe out the Amalekites. And you know that story. He comes back, and he's got the best of the sheep and the best of the oxen and the best of the cattle. He's got all the best of everything, and he has spared Agag, the king of the Amalekites. And up comes Samuel, and Samuel says, you know, what's this lowing that I hear? Have you not been obedient to God? And Saul comes up and he says, oh, listen, we just kept the best for sacrifice. And I just preserved old Agag here, the king, and that's not what God told you to do. So he got to the place, well, he didn't get to the place, he never listened to God. He never listened to what the Lord told him to do. And here is David. David takes his place. So after that whole incident with Agag, Samuel turns to leave and he says, listen, God's taken the kingdom away from you and given it to your neighbor. And Saul falls down and grabs the robe of Samuel and tears the prophet's robe. And he turns around and he says, just as you tore my robe, the Lord's torn the kingdom from you. And he goes and he finds David and he anoints David. Well, here's the poor yet wise lad who comes, for he has come out of prison. Now, I don't know how to explain that. That sounds like Joseph that he's talking about. Maybe he's talking about Joseph. Some have talked about that. I don't think so. I think what he's talking about, I feel like Charles Stanley. Now listen, here's my 36 points on this sermon. Here is, yeah, get up. I'm too comfortable. He comes and he says, he's come out of prison. Well, where's the prison? The cave of Adullam, the cave of En-Gedi. He's coming out of where he's been in hiding that he dare not come out of, like in prison because of Saul chasing him to take. Even though he was born poor in his kingdom, he's been in prison. I have seen all the living, I'm in verse 15, under the sun throng to his side. I saw all the people come to my father David. I watched all the tribes come to him. And if you read the Old Testament, it goes through every single tribe that came over to pledge themselves to David. Tribe by tribe. It's very important. I don't understand all of that. There's a reason why the Old Testament does it. But every tribe comes, and that's what he's saying right here. He says, I've seen all the living under the sun throng to the side of the second lad who replaced him. That is, David who replaced Saul. There is no end to all the people who were before them. Everybody was before Saul and David. And he said, and even the ones who will come later will not be happy with him. He says, there came a time in the life of David when the people were unhappy with him. This amazes me with American politics. I don't care who we elect president. We are all so excited for the guy to get in office, and 2 weeks in, we're sick of it. Well, there came a time where everybody turned on David. And you said, where in the world did that happen? Well, I'm going to take you back to it. It's in 2 Samuel. And I want you to see it. I want you to listen to it. 2 Samuel chapter 15. I want you to hear what is said. It came about, I'm in verse 1, after this that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men. He got 50 people to campaign for him. That's what they did. They were runners. They campaigned. They were knocking on doors. They were going into places handing out leaflets. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. When any man had a suit, because that's where the law court was in the gate of the city, and he'd say, from what city are you? And he would say, your servant is from the tribe, one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom would say to him, see, your claims are good and right. He never even heard it. Oh, whatever it is you're bringing, it's good, it's right. But no man listens to you on the part of the king. David's not listening to you. The king's not listening to you. See, even David got to this point. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land. Then every man who has any suit or cause could come to me, and I would give him justice. And when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he would put out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. And in this manner Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. And Absalom stole the hearts of the people away from David. It's exactly what Solomon's talking about right here. He says there's no end to all the people, to all who were before him. But the ones who came later, they won't be happy with. They'll abandon him and they'll go off to Absalom. For this too is vanity and striving after the wind. Fading popularity. That's what David was experiencing. It drives us nuts to think that we're losing our hold on certain people. We've got to be successful. We've got to hold on to them. Here's Absalom, who is going out now, and everybody is running to him, just like everybody ran to David from Saul. That's what success will do to you. It will bring you to the place of fading popularity. Now, let me give you the last thing, and it's the fourth thing, and it's this. Success will drive us to the place of isolation. We just isolate ourselves. Now, let me go back to verse 7. I wanted to leave this to last because you're going to get to verse 9, 10, 11, and 12, and Solomon's going to come out with another just burst. Now, let me tell you what he's doing through. He's just whining. Through this whole book, that's a lot of what he does. He's just whining about all this stuff. I'm successful, but I'm not happy. I'm successful, but I'm detached. I'm successful, but I'm not satisfied with what I've got because somebody's got something else, something better than what I'm. And so all of this he's wanting. But yet, let me tell you, when you read Ecclesiastes, you're going to come to these little pops of wisdom and you're going to stop and think, oh my, how good this is. How does this fit in? It fits in because even in our foolishness, God gives us moments of sanity. Just gonna wait. He'll give us a clear word, won't he? So he comes then in verse 7, and he's talking about all of this isolation that success brings. Then I looked again at vanity under the sun. It was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother. He says, and yet listen, there was no end to all of his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with the riches, and he never asked, and for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity. It is grievous. Here's a guy that is working his fingers to the bone. In his success, he's run his wife off. In his success, he's run his kids off. I could give you a great illustration of Jimmy Jones, who was the coach at Dallas on that. Just know there's a good illustration on that. He's run his family off. He's run his wife off. He's run his kids off. He's run everybody away from him. He doesn't have any friends anymore because all he thinks about is work. You know who he's describing here? Think about this time of year. Who is being described in this? Scrooge. All he does is he works, endlessly all day long, and he goes home at night and he counts his money, and he has not a friend to the world. He's got one nephew, his sister's boy. That's all and he won't have anything to do with him because he thinks he is just a spendthrift, that he just wastes money. And so here he is. He's all alone. His business partner has died. Marley is dead. That was for certain. That's how it opens. And he's got old Bob Cratchit, but he doesn't do anything but bark at Cratchit and demand more work out of him and more work out of him and more work out of him. Nobody comes around him. No dogs come around him. No children come around him. And do you remember the ghost of Christmas Past? The ghost of Christmas Past comes to him and takes him back to his past and back to the little girl that he fell in love with. Her name was Belle. She was in love with him, but she broke up with him because she said, you know, Scrooge, all you're interested in is in the material, in finances. You're not interested in me as a person. You're just interested in that. And she broke up with him, and that was the hurt of his life. But he went on, and the ghost of Christmas past takes him, and he takes him into the home of Belle and her husband, and he's watching Belle, and she's so happy, and she has a great husband, and she brings up Scrooge. She says, I wonder where Scrooge is. And her husband says, oh, he is quite alone. And Scrooge turns away and he says, take me away. I don't want to see this anymore. Because all that is important to him is success. That's all I want. Now, I honestly believe that Ecclesiastes is autobiographical. Solomon is writing about his life. He had 700 wives, 300 concubines. He had all of that. If you remember back to the opening sermon I did, I told you how much food they prepared every day, enough food for 10 to 20,000 people. He ate every day with 10 to 20,000 people, all of these wives, all of these concubines, and in the midst of it all, there is nothing but loneliness in his life. I'm a success. You know, Scrooge never thought who he was working for. What was he going to do it when he died? Who was going to get all of that when he died? Who was going to be the recipient of all those things? And you stop and you think back to his daddy David. When you think of David, let me tell you what I think about with David. I think about Abigail and Bathsheba. He loved them. Now, what he did was not right, but he did love them. There was Joab, his general. That was his right-hand man. He was with Joab and trusted Joab. There were the mighty men of David. There were the 30, and then there were those that attained to the 3. These friends, do you remember the 3 friends that left and said, we're going to go back behind enemy lines into Bethlehem and we're going to get water from the well that because David said, oh, if I could just drink of the water out of the well at Bethlehem. Now those were friends. We'll put our life in jeopardy to go get you some water from out of the well from which that's like 3 of you men driving back to 5 Dargan Avenue in Greenwood, South Carolina, and getting me a glass of water out of the tap that I used to drink out of growing up and bringing it back to me. Now that's what they did, except these people would kill you. Well, there's some of them in South Carolina that, you know, that's what it is. I think about Ahithophel until he betrayed him. Ahithophel was his closest friend. He said we would walk up to the house of God together. And yet now he comes to this place of isolation where he's isolated everybody. Now that brings me, if you would, to this great passage that is right here. You know, there are weeks in your life that you feel like Solomon. Anyway, listen to what he says. I've never done a wedding that I've not read this passage because I think it is just too good. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, I've fallen 3 times this week. And you know who picked me up? My little wife. I was laughing the whole time and she was in a panic. For if either of them falls, one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there's not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, 2 can resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. Now listen, here's the whole thing. Verse 9 is on companionship. 2 are better than 1. God puts you together as a couple so that there would be companionship. You have a better return in your life. I can tell you, I am a better man because of the companion God put me with. The second thing is friendship. Verse 10, if either of them falls, there's a friend there. That friend is there to pick me up, to help me. Whether I sin and they pick me up from the sin, whether I fall physically and they pick me up. Verse 11 is togetherness. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. That's the togetherness of the two. And then in verse 12, it speaks of loyalty. If one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist. I had a best friend growing up, and buddy, if anybody ever did anything to him, I was right there to help him fight. That's what he's talking about there. But let me tell you something. When you're isolated, there is no companionship. There is only competition. And when you are isolated, there is no friendship. There is fragmentation. And when there is isolation, there is no togetherness. It's just toughness. And when you are in isolation, there is no loyalty. There is just lovelessness. And that's where Solomon was. And in the middle of this chapter, talking about success that drives me, and it's driven me to the point to where I have no friends, no one loyal, no one who cares, no one who will pick me up. I love this time of year, and I'll give you one good reason why. Because there's a movie that comes on television this time of year that's easy to find. It's called It's a Wonderful Life. And old George Bailey, who grows up in Bedford Falls all his life, all he's going to do, I'm going to be a success. I'm going to travel the world. I want a big old bag where I can put, stickers from everywhere all over the world. If you ever watch that movie, just look sometime, pause it with all those stickers and look at all the places. I'm going to go everywhere. I'm going to come back. I'm going to get an education. I'm going to be an engineer, and I'm going to build cities. I'm going to be a success like nobody has ever seen. And he never gets to go. He has to stay there in Bedford Falls, and his dad dies of a stroke, and he has to go down to the old Bailey Building and Loan, and he has to run that, and he hates it. He's sick of it, and yet he's determined he will stay there because he doesn't want old man Gower, the only other person in town, the only other bank in town, to get his hands on everything because the old man was greedy himself. He says, that's why I'm going to stay here. I'm going to run this thing. Everybody else goes off. Everybody else gets an education. Everybody else becomes, if you watch this, everybody else becomes famous. His little brother goes off and becomes a war hero, comes back, gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. Everybody else goes off. Wainwright goes off, starts a plastic factory. The future's in plastics. That's what you've got to be in, and becomes this fabulously wealthy guy to the point to where George Bailey decides, I don't want to live anymore, and he goes down to the bridge to throw himself off. And as he's standing there looking, old Clarence shows up, and he throws himself off. And George Bailey jumps in to save him. You ever thought that God's put somebody in your life that's in worse shape than you are for you to care for them in order to get your mind off of yourself? And so George Bailey says, I wished I'd never lived. And Clarence says, okay, you got it. And he saw what it was like if he had never lived, what would have happened to everybody if he had never lived, as if his life never existed. But then in the end, let me show you what happens.
Lord, the fool flew all the way up here in a blizzard.
Carry on about your Banford in New York.
Oh, I left right in the middle of it. As soon as I got Mary's telegram. Good idea, Ernie. A toast. To my big brother, George, the richest man in town. That's a Christmas present from a very dear friend of mine.
Look, Daddy, teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
That's right. That's right. Attaboy, Clarence.
Turned out to be the richest man in Bedford Falls. The guy who thought he was a failure. No man is a failure who has friends. Would you stand with me?